Studio. Joining us now, Michael Guest, the Congressman of Mississippi's 3rd District. Appreciate you coming in today, Congressman.
Man, great to be here. Great to be home this week. This is my favorite week of the year, Gerard. We get Thanksgiving, so everybody gets to go spend some time with family, enjoy a great meal. Great football this weekend. State Ole Miss, the Egg Bowl Thursday night. Great high school football Friday. We've got the North and South state championships. My Brandon Bulldogs will be playing Oak Grove in the South, Madison Central and Starkville in the North.
Yeah.
And deer season is open, so there's a lot to be thankful for.
Certainly here in Mississippi, you pretty much covered what we got going on here, but it has been rather rocky up there in Washington, shall we say. Caught you last week as I was watching Representative McCarthy with that marathon. 8 hours, 45 minutes, something to that effect. Set the record there on the floor, railing against this ridiculous tax and spend bill. We've been talking about it quite a bit. They're just determined to ram that thing through.
They are, and this has been something that particularly the progressives have been pushing. And I think what we saw is when we saw the elections in Virginia, and we saw the way that the Democrats really failed very miserably in that state. We saw a very close gubernatorial election in New Jersey. I think this has awakened many of the Democrats, and they feel like that the only possibility that they have to be able to maintain power is to pass large spending bills, which gives away trillions of dollars to the American public. The good thing is, I'll say, is first, speaking of Leader McCarthy, was very proud that he was able to get up and do an 8+ hour filibuster there, being able to speak against the bill and delayed the vote tonight. Now, we knew ultimately that there was going to be a vote held, but to see that he would be willing to stand up on the House floor for 8+ hours without a break and to point out to the American people the bad things that are in this bill, and also the terrible policies that we've seen the Biden administration put in place that we're not addressing, was very refreshing for everyone on our side to see that Kevin was out there, that he was fighting, that he was advocating, that he was doing everything within his power. And then when the vote occurred, we actually saw one Democrat who voted against it from Maine. So there was bipartisan opposition. His reason for voting against the bill is something that you talked about in the earlier hour, the SALT provision, and the fact that the SALT provision is the second most expensive part of the Build Back Better, the budget reconciliation plan, and really goes against the grain of the fact that Republicans are generally opposed to the spending, but Democrats say, hey, you need to pay your fair share. But here they are giving tax breaks that really only benefit millionaires, and really only millionaires in a few states, New York, New Jersey, California. But it was good that we can at least point that there has now been bipartisan opposition, and our hope and prayer is that once it gets over to the Senate, that Senator Manchin's senator sent them over in the Senate will either fail to pass this because they're aware of how much this will increase inflation, which we have seen is the worst since President Jimmy Carter, or if they do choose to pass something, that it is something watered down, that the SALT provision comes out, that things such as giving amnesty to illegal aliens comes out, that adding 87,000 new IRS agents, you talk about building government, I don't think anybody wants to build a bigger IRS so that you've got more IRS agents who are out there combing through everyone's personal tax returns. And so there are so many things in this bill that Republicans oppose, and our prayer is that we can stop the bill in the Senate and that it will not make it out of the Senate, or if it does, again, it is a much more watered-down version than what we see now.
The concern I have, Congressman, and again, this is, maybe it's the business person coming out in me. The CBO scores these bills over a 10-year period of time as if you really can nail down what revenue is going to look like based on these adjustments. and what spending is going to look like with these programs that have expiration dates built into them in the bill so they score more favorably for 10 years. Well, you can't predict that.
That's right. And look, these programs will never expire.
Right.
The Democrats are saying we're going to create a social program and it's going to expire or sunset after 5 to 10 years. That is completely false. We are expanding the size of government by passing the president's Build Back Better plan. And these programs will never go away. These programs will become more costly over time. And the president lied to us. The president told us that this was going to cost the American taxpayers zero, that it was going to pay for itself. And we know that CBO and their conservative estimates say it's going to add $367 billion to the deficit. I believe it's going to add far more than that. And these programs that we create will be very difficult if Republicans are able to retake the House and Senate and ultimately the White House for us to roll back and to stop these programs. These programs will continue to exist into perpetuity, and as American taxpayers, we will continue to pay for these and continue to add to the $28.9 trillion debt that we currently have today.
Even the Penn-Wharton model, so besides the bipartisan, nonpartisan, actually, CBO, which is the congressional scorekeeper on budgetary matters, even the Penn-Wharton folks, which is certainly not some conservative think tank, comes out and says this $1.75 trillion bill is really $4 trillion and is going to generate a $2 trillion deficit. So why isn't that considered, I guess, in this? And I know the answer to that. They really don't care. They just want to ram this thing through.
You're exactly right. The Democrats don't care what it costs. They don't care how we pay for it. If it adds to the national debt, it adds to the national debt. No Democrat that I'm aware of has come out and said anything about the fact that we need to be fiscally conservative, that we need to make sure that we're not spending money we don't have. We saw a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus plan that the Democrats passed by themselves January, February of this year. We saw the infrastructure plan supported almost exclusively by Democrats. There were a handful of Republicans in the House, I think 13, who support it, but that is a Democrat spending bill of $1.2 trillion. And now you have this bill scored at somewhere between $1.75 trillion and then $4 trillion, depending upon what model you look at. And people wonder why we're seeing the inflation that we see. We're wondering why gas prices are going up, why it's harder, and our grocery bills are more every time that we go to the grocery store. Why this Christmas is going to be the most expensive in history is because of the continued government spending, and there being no desire to rein that in. I always wonder, where's the next Ronald Reagan? Somebody that wants to come in, who wants to talk about limiting the size and scope of government. Reagan's, one of my favorite quotes of Reagan is, government's not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem.
Absolutely.
And if that's going to be the case, then we have to find a way to shrink the size and scope of government. And when we do so, we're going to be able to shrink the cost of government.
Yesterday, I listened to the president make his announcement about the reappointing Jerome Powell as the Fed chair. Your thoughts about that? Do you think that's he's the right person for the job here?
I think we could have done a lot worse. You see, I think Elizabeth Warren has come out very recently since that announcement has been made, saying that she disagrees with that appointment. I think that when he was originally appointed, I think the vice president voted against that appointment. Right. And so, I think with this president and this administration, that he is the best that we could hope for. Now, are there better people out there? If President Trump was in office, if there was some other conservative Republican president, I think we could have done better. Yeah. But I was very concerned with who the president might appoint, and so the fact that he has reappointed Powell to this position, I think as conservatives, we should be happy with that appointment.
And I kind of am in the same boat. My concern is that he's maybe his more dovish stances might not be the best if we continue to see this so-called transitory inflation really take root, which it appears it is, and just keep tracking forward. So I'm not sure that in an election year especially he'll take the appropriate action to clamp down on that. It's my concern there. But I agree, could have done worse. Could have had Brainerd, the vice chair, as the chair, which is almost in the same vein as Sale Omarovo, which is just mind-boggling. But nonetheless, we got a break right here. You can hang around with us?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right, good, because I want to talk to you about the continuing resolution, which comes up this time every year. This is how we finance our government, believe it or not. Stick around, folks. We'll be back with Congressman Mike B. Our friend Terry Burton says, that's my congressman. Keep it up. There you go, Congressman. All right, so let's continuing resolution stuff. Let's just be honest. We don't have a traditional budget process in our federal government. We just keep raising the debt limit, right? And we sort of pass, well, let's just keep spending money on this, what amounts to, in these continuing resolutions, correct me if I'm wrong here, Congressman, are so-called discretionary spending items. The mandatory spending items, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest, which is now about 70% of our spending, that just keeps on trucking without any authorization from the Congress. It's the continuing resolution, which covers defense and all the other rest of government. And every year we get to this point and say, uh-oh, guys, we're running out of money. We got to go past this resolution to keep spending it. Can we break this cycle?
We can, and you could give that authority to the Treasury just to automatically raise that. But I think as Republicans, we don't want to do that. We want to be able to have a debt ceiling so that hopefully we can use that to rein in future spending. My concern and my fear is if we give that to the administration, whether it be Republican or Democrat, then we as Congress lose some control over spending and trying to, at least in the long term, impact the trajectory of that spending.
Yeah.
And we just basically give the administration a blank check to go take it and do what they want to. And it is sad that we always come down to the last minute, the 11th hour, before anything is done. But particularly as it relates to this Congress. I mean, the Democrats have frozen, in essence, the Republicans out of any major decisions. They're going to make the decisions. They're going to determine how the money should be spent, where the money should go, and they're going to pass things such as the Build Back Better without one single Republican vote. The same thing with the in January where they passed the stimulus bill, again strictly along party lines, and then they come back to Republicans and then they say, now we want you to help us pay for that.
Yeah.
And I and many of my colleagues, we fundamentally disagree with the fact that if we're not being part of the spending discussion, then Democrats who have the ability to pass any sort of suspension of the debt limit, they have the ability to do that without Republican vote. And I think that that's what needs to happen. We know that we're going to reach the debt ceiling roughly now December the 15th. I think it was originally the 3rd. I think now we've seen that the 15th is that magic date. And Congress will have to figure out how we're going to tackle that. But I'll just tell you personally that I'm not going to vote to extend the debt ceiling because I think this is a problem that the Democrats have helped create. They've exacerbated this problem, and they have the votes and they have the ability to raise the debt ceiling without any Republican input. And I think myself and particularly many of my House members, Republican House members, we will not be voting to raise the debt ceiling.
Interesting. So, all right. So, what happens then if you don't vote for it? Are the votes there to still do it if it's bipartisan?
They are, particularly in the House. Now,
in the House, sure.
And the Senate becomes a little dicier because of the filibuster.
Right.
So, if Republicans in the Senate choose to filibuster, there are options for the Democrats to go it alone, to use the budget reconciliation process where they have 50 senators to raise the debt ceiling without any Republican support. I know that there's been ongoing talks between McConnell and Schumer about what that's going to look like and how that may happen. And so we'll see. But, we've got the debt ceiling vote coming up. And we also have the fact that, we have a continuing resolution that is set to expire on December the 3rd. We've not passed the necessary budget bills that we were supposed to pass in October. And so the country has been operating on a continuing resolution. That resolution expires December the 3rd. And the sad thing is the Democrats have spent so much time on the Build Back Better and the infrastructure that they've not even talked about doing the basic necessities that we need each and every Congress, which is passing budget bills.
Yeah.
And so those discussions have not been held, in which we've got members of the House and the Senate, Republicans, Democrats, sitting down together to trying to hash those bills out. And so the government ceases to be funded after December the 3rd. I anticipate that there will be a continuing resolution, which will keep the government open. But the question is, how long does that resolution? Is that a short-term resolution till December the 17th? Is that continuing resolution, does that go into sometime January, February, March of next year? I tell you, if it's a short-term resolution to December the 17th, you might as well not pass it. We're not going to have made any more progress by December the 17th than we will have on December the 3rd. And so if the Democrats want to continue for the government to function not by way of a written budget, by way of a continuing resolution, then that needs to be some long-term resolution that's going to last several months, not some short-term 2-week resolution.
Is there a political purpose to that approach?
I think the political purpose or what has gotten us to this point right now is, again, that I think the Democrats have spent so much time, so much energy on the Build Back Better and the infrastructure plan, and trying to get moderates and progressives in the House and the Senate, trying to get all of those people on board, that they failed to pass the very necessary parts of our government that Congress should be passing each and every year.
Yeah.
Budget, debt ceiling, the NDAA, which is not the appropriations, but deals with where money that is appropriated, where that money goes to fund our armed services. And so those necessary bills that Congress should be taking up first and foremost have all gotten pushed to the side because they want to pass this very progressive Joe Biden agenda, and so they have taken their eye off the thing that we're truly supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and along those lines, so I got to ask you this: what I've thought and said on the program here is that even if this giant spending bill that passed the House and headed to the Senate, the Build Back Better plan, even if it were, quote, paid for, that's really not the issue here. The issue is that we're dramatically growing and expanding the scope of government. And the other concern I have is that, okay, today it's child tax credits. What's it going to be next round? I mean, when are we done with using government as a way to take from one class and redistribute to another class and say, look, we wiped out child poverty, because that's the victory lap we're hearing out of Democrats. Where does it stop? And shouldn't we be more concerned about this from a philosophical perspective, more so than just a financial perspective?
I agree entirely. When you look at what the Democrats have chosen to do with their Build Back Better, it is expanding the size and the scope of government. And it is taking money from one segment of individuals and giving it to another. One of the things, the paid family and medical leave that was in the bill. One of the things that I was shocked about in looking at that is, an individual who is unemployed can apply for paid family leave.
I saw that.
And so then the federal government is going to be paying unemployed people not to work for 4 weeks when they don't currently have a job. So even the programs that they are looking at creating, those programs are so fraught with erroneous policies within there that I don't know how you ever clean that up. And so again, when you're talking about, we're going to give the millionaires and billionaires, we're going to give them a tax break, but we're going to tax the middle class, because that's what some of the studies have shown. The Tax Policy Center, which is a very left-leaning group, said that up to 30% of the middle class is going to see tax increases.
Yep.
When you're removing provisions for pro-life, such as the Hyde Amendment, when you're allowing illegal immigrants a pathway to citizenship, when you're creating a beefed-up IRS with 87,000 new IRS agents, those things should be concerning to all Americans.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be conservatives who are concerned with the direction of the country, but conservatives, progressives, moderates, we should all be concerned with the fact that we are greatly growing and expanding the government under this administration.
And we should explain, you made a great point, the Hyde Amendment. So this is not, which precludes taxpayer funding of abortion, essentially. We should explain that has to be included in the budget each and every year.
That's right, and it has been included in a bipartisan manner for a number of years now. And now we see again, because the Democratic Party has become more and more progressive, that they're looking at pulling that out, which would then allow taxpayer-funded abortion, which I think many people disapprove of.
That's going to be a big old mess. We got a break right here. We've got Congressman Michael Guest in the studio with us. Hang around, folks. Middays will be right back. Middays, Congressman Michael Guest is our guest in the studio here. So, Congressman, you were sharing with me off the air that Republicans have generally had little to no, actually none, I think is what you said, no input into this giant spending bill.
No, that's correct. And that's one thing that we probably don't do a good enough job of expressing that message. Is this Build Back Better plan that the Democrats were able to pass out of the House with no Republican support just last Friday. This is a bill that has been debated, that has been written strictly by Democrats, and where you've seen the moderates and the progressives, members of the House and Senate, try to come to some sort of agreement on what should be included in that. I think ultimately the House went ahead and passed their version, exclusive of what the Senate wanted to do, because of Manchin and Sinema not being able to move the bill as quickly as they had hoped. And I do think that there are some things in there, particularly the amnesty to illegal aliens. The Senate parliamentarian has already ruled that is not something that is going to survive in the Senate. So that's going to have to come out. Bernie Sanders is adamantly opposed to the salt, the raising the salt deduction, which is something that the House put in to pacify moderates in the House, particularly moderates from the states of California, New York, and New Jersey, who were looking at voting against that legislation. And so much of what is going on, even though there are very narrow majorities in the House, right now 4 votes, and we have an equally divided 50-50 Senate, we're not seeing bipartisanship. And that's what President Biden ran on. He said, look, if I'm elected president, I'm going to restore order, and we are going to govern in a bipartisan manner. And we've not seen that. The president has not honored that campaign pledge. And the president really has bent over backwards to try to modify, to try to mollify or to try to appease the progressive members of his party. Day one, what did he do? He signed executive orders stopping wall construction. He did away with the Remain in Mexico policy. He did away with the Keystone Pipeline, and we've seen the effects now of gas prices. He stopped drilling and leasing on federal lands for us to drill for oil and natural gas. And so the president has tacked further and further left since he has taken office, and I think we see the impact that it's had on our nation.
So let me ask you this. When you served under Republican House, and with
I did not serve.
You didn't?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
we never had. That's right, because that flipped in the midterm.
Senate,
my bad.
Republican Senate, Democrat-controlled House since I've been in Congress.
That's
yes.
right. You're right. All right. So perhaps, though, you have some insight. Is that the case when Republicans have control of the House? Do they exclude the Democrats when discussing and debating and crafting complex legislation like this?
As I've been informed, particularly when you're looking at things such as an infrastructure bill, that we've never passed an infrastructure bill that did not have large bipartisan support, buy-in from both Republicans and Democrats. There may always be a handful of Republicans who may not vote for or Democrats, but as a large majority of both parties would support those major sweeping pieces of legislation.
Yeah.
And so my thought process is, look, if we're going to pass bills that are spending not billions but trillions of dollars, there should be buy-in from both Republicans and Democrats. And that's not something that we've seen. Now, we saw under President Trump, we saw several stimulus bills, which did spend large amounts of money and helped our small businesses stay open in their time of need, helped with research for a COVID vaccine, helped make sure that there was testing available. And we saw those large spending bills have bipartisan support, overwhelming bipartisan support. but that's not something that we've seen since this president has taken office. And it is very discouraging, I think, for people who may have supported Biden, thinking that he was going to govern in a bipartisan manner, and he really has done the complete opposite. And again, to see him on a daily basis, the way that he has just been over for the progressives to make sure that whatever they want is being considered is very discouraging.
It was a key talking point during the campaign. You know, they blasted President Trump, suggesting that he just had no desire and had no ability to build relationships on the other side of the aisle and work together. We had to vote for President Biden and usher him into office because he would patch up that and he would ensure that we'd have bipartisanship. That just hasn't been the case.
You know, it hasn't, and I think the American public is really beginning to see that, because you look at recent polling numbers, and those polling numbers fare very well for Republicans.
Yeah.
You know, we see that the president is polling recently. The last polling numbers I saw, he stood somewhere at 36%.
Yeah, below 40.
Who favored him, and so you know on many of the key issues, President Biden is underwater. And the great thing is the generic polling question of if you were to vote today, Republican or Democrat, without saying who those people would be, those people that are talking about the House, 46% of the American public say that we think that the House should be in control of Republicans, while only 38% say it should be controlled by the Democrats. And so I think the American public is waking up to the fact that we have, at this part, one-party rule, that the Democrats control the White House, they control the Senate by virtue of the vice president breaking any ties, and they have a very slim majority in the House. And they've taken that one-party rule and they've squandered it. And really what they've done is they've just run up continual debt and are looking at increasing spending and social programs across government.
Yeah, like I said, this is kind of the first stab. They get this through. If they retain control, I think they keep going. I know there's more things, like the Voting Rights Act, for example, is something which, technically speaking, requires 60 in the Senate. But they're pushing hard for all that stuff.
And look, we can't ever forget that there's a continual push on Manchin and Sinema to do away with the filibuster.
Yeah.
And those are the only two U.S. senators that are keeping the filibuster in play in the Senate. And without the filibuster, you would have things such as H.R. 1. You would have some of the amnesty plans that Democrats have been trying to push. Yeah. You would have increased spending. And so, thank goodness for the American public that we have the filibuster in place, because the Senate really has been our firewall, because all the progressive legislation that has been introduced in the House has been passed out of the House, again, almost exclusively along party line votes, but the Senate has been able to hold much of that up and be able to hold the line.
He says he still has concerns. He was asked about the bill as it is after having passed the House, says he still has concerns. I don't know where that goes. He also says he's not even working from that bill, that I guess they've got something else similar to that they're going to work on in the Senate. But, even if they do take that up, and when they do, they're going to mark it up. It's going to have to go to conference. Schumer says they're trying to get this thing done by the end of the year. You think that's possible?
I don't. I don't think there's enough time to get that done. And I think what's ultimately going to happen is the Senate will pass some version of the bill, and they will send it back to the House, and it will be take it or leave it. I don't see that, and while it is conceivable it go to conference, I think ultimately the House is going to have to vote on whatever version can pass the Senate. So whatever Manchin and Sinema and the Senate agrees on, assuming that they can agree on something, they're going to send that back to the House. And I think they're going to send it back to the House, and they're going to tell Speaker Pelosi, look, this either you pass it as is or you defeat it, but we're not going to go to conference and try to work the differences out. Now, again, that's just me speculating because we're not in the room. Again, the Democrats are controlling the discussion. They're controlling the debate as it surrounds this bill. But I think ultimately what passed out of the House was more of a messaging bill, and what may pass out of the Senate would be some bill that the president may have the opportunity to sign. I hope he doesn't have the opportunity to sign anything. I hope once it gets over there with the inflation costs and everything else that's going on, that some of the conservative Democrats in the Senate will hold the line, and that while we did pass infrastructure, that the Build Back Better bill will never see the light of day, will never make it to the president's desk.
I'm with you. I hope that's the case as well, because I fear it just is going to open up the floodgates for even more and more and more is my concern. Before you go here, you want to take a shot at what you think is going to happen in the midterms next year?
I feel very confident right now. Barring some unforeseen event, I believe that Republicans will retake the House. We've seen a couple of Democratic Senate races that have actually been moved from lean Democrat now to toss up. Georgia and Nevada were two. I think the third may have been Arizona. So, we're looking at states that are currently held by Democrats where Republicans are going to fare well. I think the president's numbers being underwater and his policies being unpopular and the rise of inflation are things that play favorably for Republicans.
Yeah, I hope you're right, and appreciate all your efforts and your representation of the 3rd District here in Mississippi. Always good to see you, Congressman.
Thank you so much, and have a great Thanksgiving.
You too, you and Haley as well. We'll be right back here on Middays. Stay with